So I think we're going to dig a little deeper now into a couple of aspects of FSMA and the alliances that are trying to work towards implementation, operationalizing FSMA. And Ben Chapman is from North Carolina State, has been with us before for Food Safety Task Force seminars, and we're really pleased that he was able to come back today. And Ben's going to talk about the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance.
I get to do a little bit of double duty today. I'm here, I guess, representing two hats. One is I'm the current chair of the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance Executive Committee and Steering Committee. So I was brought into that group, or I was asked to be part of that group back in 2011 to provide some insights on developing training curricula and doing some evaluation, and it's my turn. I guess I was nominated as the chair on a conference call that I couldn't pick up, that was on mute. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it. No, I'm joking. I've been fortunate enough to be chair of this group for the last year and be part of this alliance. And as our previous speaker went through, highlighting different parts of the proposed rules and rules that are out there, this alliance that I'm here representing focuses on this whole aspect of preventive controls. And as an academic, I'm not always the one who's most into things like I don't know, structure and governance and boards and things like that. I will tell you a little bit about what the structure is, but I'll also give you a little commentary on what I see and how things are moving along. The biggest focus of this alliance, and I'll tell you who's in it in a second and what that means and how it was formed, but the idea is FDA put out these, was tasked with these rules and said, oh man, we're now going to require many food businesses, somewhere in between probably 80,000 and 130,000 food businesses, to have a food safety plan. That's what basically the rule says. And that food safety plan, as Ruth had mentioned, has to take into account any hazard that's likely to occur for any food processor that falls under this rule, which is kind of a big deal. It's a really massive task. How things like this have been tackled in the past, as many of you probably know, in the FDA regulated world, there has been HACCP requirements for juice and there's been HACCP requirements for seafood, but now it's everybody else, and everybody else doesn't look kind of the same like the juice industry or the seafood industry does. And I say that a little bit cynically, because I know after working with seafood and juice processors, they don't look the same at all, but at least they're starting with similar hazards that are reasonably likely to occur. And now it's sort of everything else, taking in everything else under the sun. So FDA looked at this and said, we're going to need to create some educational components to go along with this, or in fact, they didn't say we're going to create it. We'd like to create a system to create educational components to go along with it, and some support mechanism, so helping the industry support itself to go forward to meet the requirements that are in the rules. And so that's really what the focus of the Alliance is. It's to create an educational body behind those rules to let people get up to speed and help them through the implementation. There are very specific outcomes and deliverables that the Alliance was tasked with, and I don't have the particulars over the funding structure. I am just the chair of the board, but I do know two things, that there were 2 grants that were given to start this alliance. One lies at a group in Illinois, at the Illinois Institute of Technology, IFISH, and another one lies at the IFPTI training center that FDA and others and AFTO use for training. These grants said, okay, create the infrastructure to IIT and create the system to manage a lot of training, like potentially hundreds of thousands of people going through this training. And that was granted, those grants were granted in 2011. But with those grants came some obvious responsibilities that were very prescriptive. You've got to create a training curriculum. You have to develop and then deliver and then facilitate the management of this massive undertaking. And once that curriculum's available or created, you need to make it available, and you need to train people that have the technical ability to train it to become facilitators in this area. Beyond that, FDA also asked to create a technical assistance network for the food industry. This is, right now, this kind of lies haphazardly within associations, trade organizations, as well as this training area, or these training aids, the support to the industry. What FDA had tasked the alliance to do was basically take a network of people that were doing this ad hoc across the country, mainly within industry organizations, as well as within cooperative extension and land grant universities, and pull that world together and say, can we have people that have specific areas of expertise that we can then create this catalog, this system where a business owner could go to a website or call a number and say, look, I'm making pickles, or I'm making jams, or I'm making an omelet, and that I'm going to put into a packaged good, or I'm drying foods, whatever it is. Can you lead me through this path of who the best people that I can ask for technical assistance on? Similar to what I've just asked for on technical assistance. For real, I haven't used a PC in like 12 or 15 years. So when Windows flashed up, I'm like, I don't know. This group, this alliance, is all kind of based with, it's the steering committee and the executive are not individual companies. It's the national trade organizations, academia, and regulators that have all come together. So these are groups like the American Frozen Food Institute, GMA, FMI, United Fresh, anybody who's involved with any sort of processing of food, as well as North Carolina State University, UC Davis, University of Wisconsin, Rutgers University. FDA plays a strong role within the alliance, and really the role to this point has been saying, here are the things that we know are in the comments to the rule. Here are the things that are in the proposed rule. This is how we would interpret some of the issues that are coming out. FDA, I've mentioned the Technical Assistance Network and some of the folks that are involved. The Hazards Guide, so for the other areas, the juice and seafood HACCP alliances, there was a hazards guide that came out that was produced in conjunction with those alliances and FDA that basically gave a list of, here are the things that are likely to occur for those areas, and here are some risk reduction practices along it and how to validate those. So this is a more longer term goal, but that was something that's been charged to the alliance to start that process. As well as knowledge gap identification. So as this curriculum gets rolled out and created and implemented, being able to try to figure out, this is trying to be everything to everyone, which is going to be very difficult, we understand, because there are lots of different types of businesses. Where are very specific things that we need more information? To give you an example that's already in the works, allergen training is one area that is not covered extensively within the current draft of the Preventive Controls Alliance curricula. It's enough to get someone started, but we know that there are many food processors that deal very heavily in allergens and would require more training, more information on how to control those hazards. So that's where we've already kind of started developing these knowledge gaps and supplemental material. And then the last piece is efficacy and impact. So it's great, and this is part of the reason why I think I was involved with this alliance, or I was asked to be involved, is it's great to come up with something, some sort of a training curriculum or intervention, but you really need to be able to measure that it works. You need to have some sort of efficacy. And so as part of the alliance's charge, that is in place. Mentioned that this is probably the area that my head explodes with on governance, but it is important to show everyone how this works. So there is an executive committee that conducts the alliance business. There's a steering committee that has stakeholders from regulatory academia and industry, trade associations. So just so I want to sort of break any myths on this. There are companies that are involved with the alliance working groups, but the steering of the entire alliance document, there are no individual businesses. It's only trade organizations representing multiple businesses. To get we set it up that way so there weren't, I'll pick on some colleagues at Kellogg's. It wasn't, this is the Kellogg's preventive controls plan. This is how the industry as a whole is looking. There are subcommittees and working groups, and these working groups have been involved over the last couple of years on providing information and input into the curricula and sharing their current plans. So that's where Kellogg's has been a fantastic member of the working group by saying, here's some of the things that we do in-house that we would like to be able to share with this alliance going forward. So here's the requisite. Here are all the logos of the people. I will move on. Those are the 5 charges that I mentioned before. Is kind of broken into 4 phases. The first one being establishing that needs to be an alliance, and that was completed at the end of 2012. Right now, we're in the midst of phase 2, which is a draft curriculum and lesson plans. And I say we're in the midst. Next week, in fact, is a preview of this curriculum is going on with some of our working group members and some individuals who've done a lot of training in preventive controls and HACCP. And it's going down next week in DC, where the curriculum is cold given to people and delivered just like a training. It's not a true pilot where we bring in the audience, but it's people that have done the training, and we want to get their feedback on where it is and how is it going and what's missing. So the curriculum itself in a draft form exists today, and we will have we're terming it a shakedown next week, which I didn't come up with it, but it sounds insidious. We'll also have some piloting that goes on. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And then implementation starting really over the next few months, but we can't do a whole heck of a lot implementation-wise until that final rule comes out. So the goal is for us in the Preventive Controls Alliance, and you'll hear something a little different from Betsy because the industries are a little different, is to have everything ready so the day that comes out, that final rule is published, we then have a curriculum that's based on it. But there's enough contentious issues within the rulemaking where we're not able to go sort of quite yet. And then transitioning this alliance to a self-sustaining model. And in fact, that's the goal. It's happened very successfully with the Seafood Alliance, where it exists as an entity on its own. That entity updates the materials, develops further materials going on, but it doesn't require taxpayer dollars to keep it going. It required that at the start, and that's really the goal of the alliance. So where are we today? Well, I mentioned a little bit about phase 2. There is a draft curriculum. Right now, the revision of that curriculum will happen over the summer after the shakedown and pilot process. We'll be field testing it quite a bit, and there'll be a complete instructor's manual. So the curriculum in its version right now is PowerPoints, instructor notes, and the framework and much of the text for an instructor's manual, and all those things will be completed really by the end of this year. Training will happen as we go forward, which is really some of the logistics and developing and printing and printing and distributing this information, translating materials to multiple languages, and then also preparing some of the instructor guide materials for multiple languages as well. There is a lot of outreach that's going on. The Alliance is kind of split into curriculum development, outreach, and continuation. And outreach is really where that network of technical experts is going on right now. So there will be a database and sort of a decision tree model where someone could come in and say, here are the things that I'm interested in learning to be in compliance with the rule. Who are the people across the country that have these expertise? Can you show me some information on that? I wanted to spend just a minute or two showing you what the course is going to look like. And so for those of you who've been involved with any HACCP training before, this isn't going to look a whole lot different. But I want to, and I'll show you in a second what I mean by this, I want to stress that preventive controls really adds other controls to the critical control points. It's not just about defining 2 or 3 or 6 critical control points. It's about having a system where there are other controls in place that support those control points. The food safety plan, and in fact, you can see the biggest component or biggest portion of this training curriculum is developing a food safety plan. It is all about those extra controls, process controls, sanitation controls, allergen controls, recall plan. These are things that support that HACCP program. So to me, and I guess I'm a bit of a HACCP purist, a HACCP plan on its own does not represent the full body of what you need to run a food safety. The food safety plan and what's in this, what the Alliance is coming out with, does incorporate that. So there's an introduction, goes into prerequisite programs, a short amount of time that's very generic on hazards, how to develop a food safety plan, and then the regulatory overview. To give you an example of what I meant by there are CCPs and there are controls that support those CCPs, here's a good summary. Ingredients. You may have very defined CCPs within those ingredients that have measurable control limits, cooking temperature control, allergen labeling, things that you can measure. Well, supplier control and all of the requirements around a supplier are controls that support those CCPs. Same thing with cooking and package in environment. You will have a CCP that says this is where whatever this product needs to get to, but sanitation and zoning are the preventive controls that support that CCP. So the food safety plan is really about beyond just a HACCP program. Here's our, it looks like a cell for those back in biology class. This is sort of the Venn diagram of what the preventive control system looks like. The food safety plan becomes the major part of it. Process control is inside of that. A recall is part of that. But then you have allergen control and sanitation control that straddle into this much larger way of running a food business. And so very much this is the philosophy of what is in the curriculum. So again, I want to reemphasize that this is not a HACCP course. This is much more about running a business from a food safety standpoint. Those who are already HACCP compliant, already have HACCP plans, won't have a problem with this whatsoever, because often when you have a HACCP program, it's supporting your whole business and there's other things that go into it. But the rule is very much about beyond HACCP. The curriculum, just some summary points. It won't be finished until after the final rule is published. We anticipate of having an initial draft complete by the end of March, and this is actually an old slide. It is complete now, and that peer review and pilots are planned, and as I described, those are going on. There's a website that tracks all of this information. Every working group, meeting notes, everything is sort of open and transparent in this process. You can see all of the minutes from every conversation that's gone on within the Alliance, as well Well as 2 weeks ago, there was a webinar that the Alliance put on to update people where they were in the process, and that's viewable on the FSPCA website, which the URL is over in the corner there, iit.edu/ifish/alliance. I will pass things on to my colleague Betsy now to talk about the Produce Alliance. I get to come back to talk about some more fun stuff in a minute, so maybe we'll hold questions until then, based on time, probably.